investigate universities that censure academics. But what is a Tsar and what do they do? And why exactly are they named after Russian emperors? Well, let's speak to Jill Rutter, a senior fellow at the Institute for Government, who's written about Tsars and how they influence public policy. Brilliantly headlined, Tsars in their eyes. So what is a Tsar, Jill?
Well, we don't really know, actually. It's a sort of completely ad hoc thing, and whether Tsar is the right name or not, who knows? I actually wrote that piece back in 2012 when some academics actually did some research on who all of these people were. But they probably defined Tsar a bit wider than I would have done, because they included a category of people I call celebrity reviewers. So people that government brings in to do a sort of policy review for them, what they think they need to do it. You know, we think of quite a few of them, some of which have been very influential, like the Adair-Turner pensions review that led to automatic enrolment, and that all happened and has given us actually quite a big change to the pension system, and others that are really embarrassing and get buried very rapidly. And one I mentioned there was one by a guy called Adrian Beecroft, who did a review that basically went nowhere and was disowned by the government almost instantly because it was more like a sort of golf club rant against things like maternity leave. So, but if we take it away from that, what I think Tsars better are people who sort of seem to exercise some more executive function for government, but that ministers don't want to make ministers, if you like. They do have the option of giving people peerages, and we've seen some people who might be more comfortable in these Tsar roles getting peerages. I think probably on Times Radio have Jim O'Neill on quite often. Yeah. Former Goldman Sachs chief economist. He became a minister. The guy that ran the London Olympic Committee, Paul Dayton, he was made a Conservative minister at one stage. I don't think any of them really liked their House of Lords roles particularly. They might have been preferred to be Tsars. But if you think of a recent Tsar, you could call Kate Bingham, who they brought in,
the vaccine
task force, a sort of vaccine Tsar and stuff like that. So basically, it's a very ad hoc appointment. There are no rules about how you do it. It's quite often quite untransparent, unclear why they picked people. But quite often there's sort of, I think, ministers casting around for someone they think who'll be able to solve a problem for them, give the system a bit of a kicking, bring in some sort of additional nous, a bit of business background maybe, quite often quite short-term appointments, don't go through any sort of regulated process, and potentially looks a bit crony-ish. So I think it's really important that ministers are quite public about not only who they're appointing, what they can do, where they get their authority from, and why they've appointed them.
But the irony, I suppose, Jill, you were talking about Tsars, reports being disowned, etc. Tsar, the word Tsar literally, means emperor, implies a sort of imperial power. When actually, a lot of the time, a government will appoint a Tsar, they'll come back with recommendations, and actually what it gives the government, that process, a degree of deniability. They may come back with recommendations that the government runs a mile from and then doesn't adopt. So actually there is a slight irony in the name.
Well, that's why I wouldn't call the celebrity reviewers Tsars. I would give them much more the people who are actually performing some sort of clear function rather than just producing a bunch of recommendations that ministers, as you say, either look at and think, no, not touching that with a barge pole. So I think it's when people have a bit more of an executive function. But really, they have to derive all their authority then from the minister, because you can't just randomly bring some person in and give them a bunch of powers to do things. They really have to be people who can do it through a bit of force of personality, but also because the system knows that ultimately, if you like, the ministers subcontracted a bit of their brain and a bit of their time to this person. They're saying, I want this done. You as someone I trust to get it done for me, I don't have enough time to do it, but I'm giving you a bit of my authority and space to do it, and go off and do it. And frankly, you're not under any employment contract. Don't like what you're doing, I'm going to bin you instantly. So there's no job security in being a Tsar.
Well, Jill, I'm going to take it that you're going to turn down my appointment as Times Radio Tsar, because that was a fantastic explanation of one of the most overused and misused words in Westminster's vernacular. That was Jill Rutter from the Institute for Government